Hi everybody, my name is Dana and I'm with the Technical Service Department at Nortech Global HVAC. Thanks again for joining us for another episode of the Lunch and Learn series. Today's Lunch and Learn topic, we're going to be talking about 10 very easy gas furnace tips that you can use out in the field right now today. These are going to help you during installation or for troubleshooting when you're performing service work. They're really simple, really straightforward, but they can be pretty impactful in terms of helping you to kind of eliminate some confusion or help you save yourself some time. So we're going to jump right into it and get started with those tips. The first one that I have is bookmark nordynu.com into your smartphone. Very, very often we will take calls in the tech department and the questions are really, they repeat. We keep hearing the same types of questions over and over again. And a lot of those questions can very easily and very, very quickly be found actually logging into the NordINU website. That's available to you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. It is absolutely free. It does not cost you. The only thing it will cost you is an email address. But you will not receive any emails of any variety where we're trying to send you advertisements or tell you about specials or any of that business. There is no actual cost to you at all in terms of being able to get on the NordINU website. So that's tip number one. Go ahead, bookmark nordynu.com into your browser on your smartphone. Tip number two, this one I like to call leave the money in the bag. When you open up a brand new gas furnace during installation, you are going to come across the installation instructions, the warranty paperwork, all of that kind of good stuff. And it never ceases to amaze me how easily and how often the installation instructions end up getting tossed right out of the job the moment that everybody unpacks the furnace. Don't do that. Don't throw that paperwork away. There's a lot of very beneficial and useful information in there that will come in handy later on down the road when somebody returns to perform a cleaning check or they're troubleshooting, performing service, something like that. One of the things that I like to do when I was out in the field and performing installation work is I would take the installation instructions and then I would place them in a manila envelope and I would write on the side of that envelope, furnace manuals, very important, do not remove. And then I would place that either somewhere on the return side of the furnace or on the, I'd screw the thing to a plenum, if you will, so that it was very easily marked. These are furnace manuals. There's important information there. Do not remove. Don't throw them away. It will save you a lot of time. If you show up and you need to know what the venting tables are for a high efficiency furnace, or you need to find out what the blower dip switch settings are, rather than having to sit there and struggle by making a phone call and waiting on hold or trying to contact somebody at the distributorship to see if they can get you that information, 9 times out of 10, the question that you have can be answered by the information that's already in the install instructions. And if you leave them on the job, and you easily put them in a location where they're marked and you know what they are, where they are, the homeowner knows what they are and where they are, then you don't have to search high and low for that information and waste time. Tip number 3 is concerning setting the blower speed on single-stage gas furnaces, and that's very, very simple to do. You basically have 3 functions, 3 options, if you will, when it comes to the single-stage gas furnaces. If you look at the very top of the ignition control board, you're going to have one switch labeled heat, one switch labeled cool, and then off to the side here, you have a black plastic jumper shunt. If you look off to the side of where the switches are located, you'll see H, MH, ML, and L. That's high, medium, low, and low. And so when you need to set the blower speed, all you're going to do is just move the position of the switches and line it up with the designated speed. No more, you don't have to sit there and try to identify a wire and pull it off and then relocate it on a different tap or anything like that. All you're doing is just setting the blower speed where you would like it by lining it up with the designated speed, if you will. The black plastic jumper shunt that's labeled fan, that is for continuous fan operation. And all you're going to do is you're going to line that black plastic shunt, you're going to line that up with the designated speed on the board that you want. So when you are just running a continuous fan to circulate air in the home, you can designate that by speed. You could have all three of them be the same speed, or you could have each one of them be a completely different speed. But that's just how easy it is to change or to alter or to set up the blower speeds on the single stage gas furnaces. Okay, tip number 4. Help the homeowner save the money that you promised them you would do. This really particularly pertains to 2-stage high-efficiency gas furnaces. Lots of times with higher efficiency gas heating, particularly if you have multiple stages, those require an additional kind of like an upper tier, an upper level of thermostat be installed, and then you have to set those up properly in terms of their parameters, programming, all that kind of good stuff. The simple fact of the matter is, guys, is that very, very often a homeowner may say to you that they will set up the thermostat themselves. It may be that they're waiting for another family member to be able to participate, to set the stat up where they would both want it to be, what have you. And far too often, it never happens. You set up the basics on the thermostat so that the system can be tested and operated, and then that's it. They never do actually invest the time to read through the installation manual or the setup procedure on their thermostat, and that's where it sits then for the remainder of its life, and it's not performing to its optimal levels when that thermostat is not set up properly. Another option that you have now on our 2-stage gas furnaces can really easily take away a lot of that guesswork for the homeowner. Located just to the far left side of the terminal strip on the ignition control board, you're going to see our auto stage feature on the very far left hand side, and there's another one of these black plastic shunt pieces here. And if you look carefully on the board now, you're going to see that for the auto stage feature, you have the option of being either on or off. So if you want to simplify things even more and definitely help that homeowner save money by forcing the equipment to stage, if you will, doing that is really, really simple. Even without landing anything on the W2 terminal, if you just land on W1, if you place that auto stage feature so the jumper shunt lines up with on, then the furnace will fire in high, it will prove flame, it will step back to low fire, it will run for 10 minutes, and then after 10 minutes has elapsed, it will stage itself back up to high fire and then run through the remainder of that call in high fire. No more confusing thermostat setups or anything like that for an owner that might kind of be wanting to possibly shy away from multiple stage equipment because of the increased technology factor, if you will. You can still provide them with those energy savings and help remove a lot of the fear or the confusion for them by using features just like that on our 2-stage ignition control boards. That's the auto stage jumper right up in the upper far left-hand corner of the board, just adjacent to where the terminal strip is where you will land your thermostat wires. Tip number 5. Prime the trap. Right there. When you open up a brand new high-efficiency gas furnace and you remove the blower, the blower compartment cover panel, right over here on the side of that compartment, you're going to see a clear plastic J-tube trap. When you do installations on high-efficiency gas furnaces, before you start that furnace up and begin to do your checkout procedure, you want to make sure that you prime that trap with water. If by chance you don't get that trap primed with water, what can happen is that when you first start that furnace up to do your checkout procedure, you may discover that you're getting a pressure switch fault code. That can result from the inducer pulling on the heat exchanger and actually allowing bypass air to get through that trap because it doesn't have any water in it. So make sure that every single time that you do an installation on a high efficiency gas furnace, so whether it be 92%, 95%, even on a modulating 97% gas furnace, make sure that before you do your startup and checkout procedure that you prime that plastic J-tube trap with water. Tip number 6, and it has to deal with ECM type motors, if you will. And these are becoming more and more popular with every single passing season that we have in the heating and air conditioning industry. The day is fast approaching where you'll be hard-pressed to even find a PSC motor out there any longer. One of the tips that I want to tell you about when it comes to an ECM motor, like a two-stage variable speed or even a single stage that maybe possibly has been upgraded to variable speed, is the importance of realizing that the control board during the ignition sequence or through pre-purge, if you will, the board is looking to recognize the blower early in that sequence. Even though the blower will not start, obviously, until the furnace has fired and proven flame, while the furnace is going through the pre-purge sequence, it's actually going to begin looking right away for the presence of the motor so that it knows that the motor is communicating and it's ready to operate once ignition has taken place. If it does not see that the motor is communicating properly, it's going to actually interrupt and suspend the ignition sequence so that the furnace then will not fire and then begin to just sit there and try to cycle itself in and out as far as a limit control is concerned. So be aware that if you have a two-stage gas furnace with an ECM motor in it or a single stage that has been upgraded to variable speed, when it starts the ignition process, it is going to begin looking for the motor early within that ignition sequence. So I'm going to go ahead and start this furnace up here right now, and you're going to see that just as it's beginning the pre-purge sequence, you're going to see that the board's going to recognize that it's not communicating with the motor, and then it's going to go to a motor fault condition. Pre-purge is started. And right away, we're already seeing that the board is recognizing that it's not communicating properly with the blower, and it's producing the blower fault code. Tip number 7, I like to call the power of 3. Something as simple as a 3 amp blade type fuse like this is very, very, as simple as it may seem, very effective, very useful to act as a jumper when you are needing to connect two of the female spade connections. Let's say you are trying to effectively jump out a pressure switch circuit for troubleshooting. These come in awfully handy for doing more than obviously just acting as fuse protection on a board. They come in awfully handy to act as a jumper between the female spade connections of the ends of two wires in a particular control circuit. Okay, tip number 8. I like to call this one, oops, we did it again. So one of the things that I really like about our manufacturing and our brands, particularly when it comes to the gas furnaces, is that we consistently will design and make the control circuits out of the same color of wires from one model to the next and so on. So as an example, like on G6 models, the limit circuit was entirely made of blue wires, and the pressure switches would typically be in orange color wires, things like that. So if you look now in the G7 line, you'll see that we've got a limit circuit, and that's blue wires. We've got a pressure switch circuit here, and that's orange wires. We consistently do that over and over again from one model to the next. So like, again, as another example, in a two-stage furnace, if you know that the low fire pressure switch circuit is orange wires and the high fire pressure switch circuit is purple wires, when you recognize that on one two-stage model, it doesn't matter which model then from that point forward. If you're looking at a 60,000, an 80 to 100, up to 120, those circuits remain the same. Also, as far as the limits are concerned, or gas valves, things like that. So when you begin to recognize those circuits, what they are, and then recognize them by color, you can, in our product line, you can just move from one model to the next, and you can start to open them up and very quickly, very efficiently, very easily begin to identify, okay, these are my limits, this is my pressure switch circuit, and it will help you make your way through the inner cabinet and the wiring very quickly and very easily. Number 9, and that has to deal with the electrical or earth ground reference for the inner electronics, the control boards, and the power circuit that supplies that furnace with power. When we are talking about the earth ground reference of the circuit, we're not really necessarily just talking about, do you have that ground wire tight, if you will. You have to have a proper earth ground in that circuit. The board goes back to earth ground, if you will, and part of the importance of that ground is that this is the process that the control board uses to be able to prove and rectify flame. As an example, on a gas furnace, when that furnace fires, it begins to then travel back through the flame sensor, or it's emitting off of the flame sensor, traveling back through earth ground, and the board is also then grounded to chassis. It's very important that you know that you have a proper earth ground in that circuit that supplies the furnace so that the remainder of the electronics in the furnace will benefit from that. Without having proper ground, you can be in a floating ground condition, and the board may struggle to actually operate and perform all of the functions that it properly should. If you do not have a ground, like let's say it's an older home, you discover that you only have like a hot and a neutral, you're going to want to add an external ground and wire that up for the furnace. Otherwise, it could struggle right off the bat with being able to prove flame. If you want to test ground, you can do that very quickly, very easily when the power is on to the furnace. If you test from neutral, the incoming neutral from the panel for the furnace, if you test from neutral to ground, you should read no AC volts whatsoever. If you begin to pick up AC volts from neutral to ground, that can indicate that you don't have a significant earth ground in that circuit. If you read anything greater than half a volt AC from neutral to ground, that will definitely indicate that you do not have a substantial earth ground reference for that circuit that's providing that furnace with power. Okay, last but not least, tip number 10, and that has to deal with really, obviously, when you're out and you're selling higher efficiency equipment, one of the things that I definitely would recommend to you that you also sell is the money that you can put right back into the homeowner's pocket. You're also going to be putting money in your own pocket, but the money that you can help that owner to save over the years of operation of that new gas heating equipment is by adding a humidifier into the system. Humidifiers have come a long, long way in a very, very short amount of time. We have all seen those old soaked roller wheel style of humidifiers. They just became a petri dish. They were nasty. No one would want to service them or keep them clean. Humidifiers have come a long, long way. The simple fact of the matter is that even though it may take more energy to actually heat air with a higher moisture content, once you get that air heated, it will hold and maintain heat energy longer than air with a much lower moisture content will. Basically, if you're going to spend the money for, like, say, a two-stage 95% efficient gas furnace, it's already going to cost less to operate that furnace. So let's kind of turbo that efficiency and that savings by adding a humidifier to that furnace. Very often, owners will report that by having a higher moisture content in the house as far as relative humidity is concerned, by having a higher moisture content, they can actually reduce the physical sensible temperature on the thermostat that they want to maintain inside that space. So imagine, if you will, a house at 70 degrees and 50% relative humidity being more comfortable and feeling better, having better health and saving money than a house that is at, say, 72 degrees and 40% relative humidity or 35% relative humidity in the wintertime. So drier homes typically you will find that the temperature setting is higher. Homes that have a little bit more higher moisture content, a little bit higher relative humidity, they will actually have a lower set point in that home. So really kind of turbo mode the efficiency that you are selling to the homeowner by taking it up a notch and sell them a humidifier along with that brand new gas furnace. Thanks for watching these 10 easy gas furnace tips that you can use today. I hope you enjoyed this Lunch and Learn topic. Let's jump over now to the question and answer portion, and we'll get right over to those questions and see what you guys would like to ask us. Thanks for watching. Okay, everybody. Thanks again for joining us for another Lunch and Learn session. Please don't forget that now is your opportunity to get those questions coming in, and we'll do our absolute best to get those answered. Hopefully you found that topic for today interesting and useful. That's 10 easy gas furnace tips that you can start using right away out in the field. Obviously, this is that time of year where everybody and their uncle is trying to get a gas furnace fired up. You're doing a lot of cleaning checks, all that kind of good stuff. And so that's why we wanted to make the topic be relevant to the time of the year, the season for you, if you will. The format is now it's changing, if you will, in terms of how you would submit a question. It used to be the old box setup thing, if you will, and now you have the Ask a Question button. You click that button, and a dialogue or conversation window is going to open up for you, and you just type in your question, and then it's going to show up here for us. We do have some that have already come in. So I'll go ahead and just jump right in with the very first question. It's regarding tip number 1 about bookmarking NordINU.com on your smartphone. And the question is simply, will NordINU run on Android? And the answer to that is absolutely yes. Hopefully you did not just put in NordINU.com on an Android device and something was not working out for you. But it will run on Android or on Apple iOS. NordINU is optimized for mobile. A lot of guys may not realize this, but if you typically have been using or going through NordINU.com, like on the full web version or the full HTML version, and you find that a little more cumbersome than what you would be expecting, give the mobile version a shot because you're actually going to find that it's optimized. That Tech Literature website is optimized for mobile application, and the search functions, everything's a lot slicker and even faster on the mobile version of it, if you will. So great question there. Next question is, okay, this must be regarding the auto staging feature. Can you use the staging jumper with a 2-stage thermostat? Okay, good question, and here's how I'm going to answer that: one or the other. So if you want to use a multi-stage thermostat, then do not use the auto stage feature. If you want to use a single-stage thermostat but get 2-stage functionality out of a 2-stage furnace, then use the auto stage jumper. Obviously, use one or the other. Don't try to combine staging controls and the auto stage jumper. I think you're going to end up with some operation there that's not quite as predictable, if you will. And I love predictable. I know that might sound a little corny, but one of the things that I found to be one of my greatest tools for troubleshooting when I was still in a service truck every single day was when I could walk down into somebody's home, fumble around in the dark to find the light switch, and move over to that gas furnace, and before I even had the front
jacket service panel off, I pretty much already knew exactly what I should be expecting to see happen when that furnace was working correctly. There weren't going to be any surprises for me. And if there were, then I knew that was out of place, if you will, if that makes any sense. So use one or the other. Either use the auto stage feature or use a two-stage thermostat so you know that you have predictability there. Okay, next question. Why don't you put the paperwork in a plastic envelope that we can leave on the job? Okay, good question. The simple answer is most likely because that costs more than what we would want it to. You have to realize that you would seemingly tell yourself, well, it couldn't cost that much. Well, if we did 1,000 furnaces in a day, you're right, it wouldn't cost that much. If we do 10,000 furnaces in any given quarter or what have you, all of a sudden that starts to add up. And it's kind of one of those things where it's like, what do we put money into this portion of a piece of equipment in terms of equipment or design or what have you? Do we put money here or do we put money here? If we were to spend more money on doing something like a plastic envelope that's already labeled that you could just sit there and hang on the plenum, if you will, that has to affect the back end, if you will. That has to affect what the consumer would have to pay for that furnace, and that starts to make you not as competitive in the market, if you will. So we'd rather put the money into a better igniter or a better motor or better graphics or something like that than to put money into something like a plastic envelope, if you will. But it's a perfectly fair question. So. Okay, next question. What is the expected CO values with LP and natural gas? Is there a minimum or maximum value? Okay, so when it comes to CO, I'll tell you flat out, we're always going to target 100 parts per million. I've never known us to change that number dependent upon fuel. So we'll always target 100 parts per million. In the flue. We don't want to see anything in terms of the airstream, obviously, from supply to return. The ANSI standard is, off the top of my head, I want to say the ANSI standard is 400 parts per million. I can't say that with absolute certainty, so don't quote me on that. We are looking to target well below that. So I'm going to say 100 parts per million on the CO value. Let's see here. Next question. How do you test the motor if it goes to a blower fault? Okay. Good question. The short answer to that is to purchase the Broad Ocean motor tester. There is a way that you can go through some test procedures on the blower. That may, most likely become another tech tip video at another time, if you will. Or even just a dedicated technical video, maybe not quite a tech tip, if you will. But the short answer to that is the 921767 blower motor kit. I actually really like that kit because it's been expanded with multiple harnesses to be able to be used across multiple motors, if you will. And I know that buying more tools makes a lot of people moan and groan because you already have a ton of tools, right? And it's cost and it's all manner of things. But I guess the question that I would want you to ask yourself is, what is not having to guess? What is peace of mind like that? What is that worth to you? Because if a Broad Ocean motor tester is $50 or less, and $50 is nothing if you take 2 service calls and you have a motor fault and you do the best that you can doing some hopscotch, doing some testing of DC voltage, but you ultimately say, I'm going with a bad motor control board or something like that, and you you go back, you get that part, you get it reinstalled into the furnace, and then you still end up with the same issue. That just totally eclipsed the cost of what a motor tester would have been. So I'm always gonna keep plugging away and recommending that motor tester because I think that has good value. Next question. The steps on how to diagnose a faulty pressure switch, vent, and condensate. Okay, that won't be something that I can really go into quickly in a lunch and learn Q&A, but the first step in terms of diagnosing a faulty pressure switch is going to be determining which, like on a 2-stage furnace, is it in low fire or high fire? Is it one of those? So, like as an example, on a 2-stage furnace, you have a grand total of 4 pressure switches, but you only have 2 circuits. So you've got 2 switches in series. You've got a inducer switch and a condensate pressure switch, and you have that for both the low fire and the high fire setup, if you will. So the first step is going to be determining which one is not closing. Second step's going, and that's part of why I wanted to do the one tip about the whole thing about the oops, we did it again. When you know that our low fire condensate switches are going to be the orange wires, if you will, and you know that your high fire switches are going to be the purple wires, it makes moving through that furnace really, really quickly. I can tell the difference because guys that I've worked with before where I'm like, okay, we need to test the low fire condensate switch. And he immediately has learned at that point, bam, it's in the lower right corner and it's got 2 orange wires on it. We can both move through that furnace very, very quickly and determine actually which switch is the one that's not wanting to close. And then we get the MagnaHelix to it to see, is it a bad switch or is it a condition where we aren't pulling enough to be able to close the switch, if you will. It's a great question, but I could go on for half an hour on testing pressure switches, unfortunately. So I'll just make it short and sweet. I'll say, first step, you got to determine is it in, which one is it that's not wanting to operate correctly, and then we have to get the MagnaHelix to it, or a digital manometer, if you will. Obviously, testing voltage, doing an ohms resistance test, but that's pretty, that kind of goes without saying, obviously, if you will. I'm not a big fan of, a lot of guys are doing continuity testing still on switches. Please don't do continuity tests. You got to, if you're gonna watch the electrical action of a switch, watch the resistance on it. Do an ohms test on it, please. Okay, next question here from Hector. Don't we use several brands of motors in the G7 line of furnaces? As far as the 2-stage, no, everything's going to be broad ocean. Now, on some of the older, like the G6 variable speed, that would have been a GE variable speed, so that you would have to be using like the Technique tester on that, Hector. The broad ocean line, we're plugging the broad ocean line into just about every single phase voltage piece of equipment that we manufacture at this point. So I would say that tester, you might find 6 examples right now that you could use the tester on. That's soon going to change. You'd be able to use that in all manner of things, if you will. So don't basically don't talk yourself out of the usefulness of that tester. Next one here. If you're allowed BX cable and it counts as the ground, do you still recommend a ground wire? Yeah, absolutely. You gotta have a ground wire in there. I know I get the whole thing with BX cable and it being ground, but yeah, you have to have an earth ground reference there, if you will. Don't try to let that BX be, because at the end of the day, it's even though yes, it should work. If it's not, you know what I mean? if the furnace is struggling to prove flame and you've got it on BX and it's supposed to count as a ground, but it won't prove flame, and then you run an external ground and now all of a sudden it wants to prove flame every time, well, there you go, you know. Next question. Do you guys recommend having the furnace plugged into a 115 plug-in? Plugging a furnace into a 115 receptacle? Actually, no. We don't recommend that. It's done all the time. There's lots of places around the country where that is allowed, and they consider that a legal means of electrical disconnect. And here's the thing, guys. If the manufacturer did not specifically supply in the packaging of a furnace, if the manufacturer did not supply the means to be able to take, like, say, an extension cord and cut that thing off and then adapt a plug into it to take it to a receptacle, that's not a legal means of disconnect then. So I realize that you may have inspectors out there that are like, yeah, we're fine with that. We are not. And one of the first things we will always do is if we find out that you're taking a gas furnace and you're plugging it into a 115 receptacle, one of the first things we'll do is recommend that you stop that and you hardwire that thing on a circuit all the way back to the panel. Because we have seen time and again, we've seen a lot of issues with furnaces where the sequence of operation, proving flame, all manner of things go haywire when you take a gas furnace and you plug it in to a 115 receptacle. Next question, are the different pressure switches operating on different currents, AC or DC? No, they're all AC voltage, Hector. How do you troubleshoot an inducer motor on a variable speed furnace? Okay, it's going to depend on the model. So as an example, Hector, on let's take an old G6 version that's got the GE motor in there. So everything that motor needs to be able to operate in terms of software, it's already loaded into the module on that motor. So now it's just waiting for 24 volt AC inputs. One of the tests that as an example, I like to do every single time because I can easily replicate it and I can easily describe it over the phone. First, you got to confirm that you've got your high voltage on the 5-pin harness. On the 16-pin harness, you're going to disconnect that out of the module of the motor. You're going to orientate that 16-pin connector so that the plastic latch mechanism is on top as you're looking at it. And then your top row, when you orientate that 16-pin connector so that the plastic latch is on top, your top row of pins from your left to your right would go 1 through 8. Bottom row of pins from your left to your right would go 9 through 16. And what I like to do is have guys just do a fan call from the thermostat, go from pin 1 to pin 12 and look for 24 volts AC, go from pin 1 to pin 15 and you should see 24 volts AC. If you've got your high voltage and you have both your low voltage signal inputs into that motor and the motor won't turn or do anything else, 9 times out of 10, that's actually going to be a problem internal to the module then, not a problem with the motor control board. It gets a little fuzzier when you're talking about the Broad Ocean product in terms of troubleshooting the variable speed, because the difference between like the Broad Ocean motor and the GE motor is that the Broad Ocean motor is relying upon a lot of information from the motor control board. The motor control board's communicating into the module of the motor, and it's also commanding it to run through a DC signal. It's not quite as straightforward or clear cut as what the GE motor used to have to run on. So, that's another question there that I could kind of go on for quite some time. That's going to be another issue or example though, where I'm going to recommend the motor tester be used there in that case. Next question. Powered or bypass humidifiers. Okay, that's an easy one. Powered humidifiers, if you can't get them onto the supply duct, powered humidifiers are worthless. All right. Bypass, I like bypass humidifiers because you have the flexibility, obviously. You have the simplification of their wiring and everything else. So I'm always going to recommend a bypass. Powered humidifiers are great as long as you can get them where they're supposed to be. If you can't locate them there, then I can't recommend those. I don't care for those at all. Let's see here. Next question. Okay. I don't understand that question at all. All right. I don't understand that. I'll get that one all butchered up. I won't get that one right. Can you talk about jumping R and D hum for dehumidification as well? Okay, so on the motor control board, on a two-stage variable speed gas furnace, you have a dehumidification function there that you can enact. You can either go about it one of two ways. On the motor control board, you have an R terminal and a dehumidification terminal. You can either wire up to a duct-mounted humidistat and take one wire from R up to one side of your contacts on the humidistat and then back down to the dehum terminal. And then when those contacts close, it'll complete a circuit and slow that blower down for 10 minutes. If you don't do it through a duct-mounted humidistat, then you'll just have to hardwire the circuit from R to dehum. That's one of those applications there, though, where you got to be careful because especially if you're doing like heat pumps or something like that, you got to be careful there in terms of just making that a jumper from R to dehum, if you will. So that's one of those where if you're not absolutely sure that it's going to work for you the way that you should, please make a phone call into the tech department before you just put a jumper wire from R to dehum on the motor control board, please. Okay, it looks like the questions are starting to slow down now. I'll keep looking here real quick. Okay, when is the two-stage 38,000 BTU furnace going to be out? The two-stage 38,000, for some reason, I'm thinking we already have that out in a two, or what's the smallest two-stage? Is that, oh wait, it might be a 60. I don't have the, guys, you gotta remember, I live in, when I'm a question like that, I gotta have the website up in front of me. The smallest two-stage might be a 60, I believe. And the smallest single stage, we go from 54 down to 38 in the single stage. I think that's what that is. So I don't know. That's something where I'd have to check with the product manager to see when we would expect to do a two-stage 38,000 BTU furnace. I don't know. Don't forget, I'm a mechanic, right? So if you start lobbing some product type questions in here or like sales type or warranty questions, I may not always necessarily know the answer to that. I can find the answer out. Jeff, to be honest with you, you could probably get the answer on that faster with a phone call to your sales rep faster than you could on something like a lunch and learn, unfortunately. So, thank you, Lee. 60,000 is the smallest in a two-stage. All right. Very, very good. My brother's down south. Thank you very much. Okay. Everything looks like it's starting to slow down here. I don't think I'm missing any. There's the one. I don't understand that question at all. So I'm not gonna repeat it, if you will. Okay. I've got the humidifier CO values. Brian, I hope that was okay on that 100 parts per million. That's what I want you to target, 100 parts per million. Got everything from Hector. Okay. On an IQ G7 with the IQ controller and using a powered humidifier, how would you control connections to be completed? Do you mean you want to use, Hector, you're talking about using the controller as the humidistat? Is that, I would assume? So on an MQ, you're making, okay. On an MQ, God, this is one of those moments where I wish I could pull up a schematic right in front of me. When you have a G7MQ, what you're going to have to do is when you go into accessories on the controller setup, you have to tell it that you have a humidifier. Then you're going to set your humidification set point that you want, and then you're going to wire that to. There's a humidifier terminal on the motor control board for the MQ models. That's a 24 volt output. So humidifier and common on the motor control board, if memory serves. I can't see a schematic right now, obviously, but I wish I could. On the controller, Hector, go into the accessories, tell it there's a humidifier. You set your humidification set point, and then on the motor control board, it's humidifier and common. And that only works as a 24 volt output on IQs, if you will. Just be aware of that. Okay, looks like everything's kind of slowing down here. So if that's it, okay, no. We were told there was a 38,000 BTU furnace coming soon. Jeff, there may very well be. I'll be honest with you. That's a question right there. I wouldn't even think to ask that in any given day of one of the product managers, just because I'm going to be dealing with tech stuff, why this doesn't work or what have you, one after another. It could very well be that there's a 38,000 BTU capacity in the works. I just don't know 100% for sure when that would be. I'd have to ask a question to the product manager, and I obviously don't have the ability to do that in this forum here, if you will. So, unfortunately, I can't answer that question for you with a definitive date, if you will. If you were to submit that question if you were to send that in an email to tech service at Nortec, we could find out from the product manager and just reply back in the email that way. Otherwise, I would definitely say contact your sales rep, and they'll be able to give you more details on something like that. Okay, so with that, guys, real quick, don't forget on November 20th, that Lunch and Learn topic is it's called Mobile Madness, and that one's about smartphones and what the impact of smartphones are now in the world of HVAC, November 10th, not the 20th, November 10th. I'm sorry, November 10th. November 24th is the importance of using a MagnaHelic, and I'll probably be doing that one. Man, I hope we get some good traffic for that one, because it blows my mind how many guys do not have a MagnaHelic on their truck, and I mean, that's almost kind of like either not having a right hand or having a test meter, in my opinion. You have to have a MagnaHelic on your truck, especially now. I mean, the 8 and 10 SEER days, we got away with an awful lot. Now, if you got like a 16 SEER cranking away out there, you need to know what your airflow is, And then December 8th, that is ductless mini splits and commercial VRF systems, how to get into the mini split arena there, if you will. That's probably going to be a pretty good one too. Mini splits those things are huge now. A lot of people interested in doing mini splits. So those 3 are the upcoming Lunch and Learn topics. I don't see anything else here that's come in that's new. So we'll go ahead and we'll call this one good. Thanks a lot for watching. I hope you found this Lunch and Learn useful. Don't forget that we're always open to, we're open to ideas, if you will. We want to do broadcasts and topics on the things that interest you, that your customers want more information on. We aren't just trying to pull information or topics, kind of like, pie in the sky, if you will. If you have suggestions, if you definitely know that you have kind of like a a hot topic that really seems to be cropping up time and again with your customers, let us know. And if it's definitely something where we could easily do a tech video on it, you know, we'll jump all over that every single time. So thanks again for watching. Hope you enjoyed today's Lunch and Learn, and we'll see you again on the next one real soon. Have a great day.